Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about something called scoping and let and const. Okay, so I know that Dr. Anderson has talked a little bit, but he's going to talk about scoping in class. I am just using scoping to get to let and const, which are some really cool ways to declare variables in ES6. ES6 JavaScript. Anyway, so really quick, brief intro of scoping. Scoping is basically how we can define where variables can be used within the code. There's in JavaScript, there's different things called, there's the difference between global versus local scoping. Local. And what we've been doing a lot so far is global scoping, where we've been using var as our keyword to declare variables. We've been declaring them all outside of we haven't been using functions, so we haven't been creating any local variables inside a function. We haven't been using let and const, so we haven't introduced block scoping. So a lot of our variables have been global. I'm going to talk about how we can get from global to local, and kind of discuss what's happening in the background with JavaScript, making things global variables right now. So let's just take this for example. Let's say we have var I count equals 0. And then we have if true, console.log I count. And then let's also console.log I count out here. Okay, let's actually do a plus plus so that we can see that something's a little bit different. So if I take that and stick that in my console, I can see that there's a 0 and a 1. Let's zoom that in a little bit too. 0 and then 1, which is expected. I expect this console log to be 0, and then this console log to become 1 after the plus plus. That makes sense. We've seen that before. Now here's something that we want to kind of take a look at. So we're going to say var foo equals hello world. Okay. Now in here, I'm just going to do a quick foo, and just to see that we can see this in here. And what's interesting is that we can actually do this out here as well. So let's go ahead and copy that. Let's refresh. Let's paste that in. Actually, let's refresh first. Make sure we clear out all our variables and then see what it says. Okay, so this 0, hello world, is within the if statement. This 1 is the I count outside the if statement, and then this foo, this hello world, is the foo outside of the if statement as well. Now it's weird, especially if you're coming from other programming languages, is that this foo should not be available outside of this if statement. Typically, if statements are going to block your code, create a block scope within your code, so that foo is only available within the if statement. It gets created here, it gets used here, and it gets thrown out once it's outside of the if. JavaScript is different. When you have an if statement or a for loop or a while loop, I think, and then do a while loop, so your if or your loops, or maybe also switch statements, it actually does something called hoisting, and it will take your variable declaration and put it at the top of the page. That means that this variable is actually accessible throughout everything, whether or not it's in the if or without the if, or outside of the if. Now what's even more interesting is that we can do something like this should be foo. Okay? So what's happening here? Okay. So what's happening here is we're going to try and see what foo is before we ever declare it in our code. Now, yeah, we'll show that first. Now let's actually refresh and go. So it says this should be foo, undefined, 0, hello world, 1, hello world. Now the reason that we're seeing undefined here is just like I showed before, JavaScript is hoisting our variable up so that it is declared. And when you declare a variable, it is automatically set to the keyword undefined. So when we're coming here, we should expect undefined because the variable is declared. When it's declared up there, it is not assigned to anything. The assignment happens down here on line 7, but it does exist. So JavaScript will say, hey, I know that this variable exists because it got hoisted to the top. However, it hasn't been assigned anything, so I'm just going to say undefined. So at this point in the code, it does equal undefined. Later on, when we're actually at this point, when it looks like we're declaring and assigning it, we're actually just assigning it to hello world. So now we see our 0 and hello world. And then after, it is still available. And the reason being is because that variable declaration is actually hoisted by JavaScript to the top of your page when the variable is declared within an if statement, a for loop, a while loop, etc. This is not the case for functions. Functions have block scoping worked into it, so your var actually will be a local variable to the function. So let me show you that really quick. Let's just go ahead and delete all this. Let's just say function myfunc. Okay, we're not going to do anything fancy with this. Actually, let's call this that myfunc. So now let's say var foo within here equals hi universe. I'm terrible universe. Okay. Let's console log that bad boy out. Foo. Okay, now to make this a little bit more fun, we're going to bring back our var I count equals 0. And then let's also have, we need to call this func. Let's call I count inside of that. And then let's try and call foo outside of this. Okay, so let's just look at what's happening. We're declaring a variable I count, setting it equal to 0. Then we're creating a function called myfunc. This function has a variable called foo. We're setting it equal to hi universe. Now we're going to console log both our variable I count and foo. So that's all that this function is going to do. We're going to call that function, so we expect it to run. And afterwards, we're going to do console.log foo and see what happens. Okay, let's copy that. And we'll just see what happens and then kind of discuss what it did. Okay, so let's look at this. It looks like, so it outputs something here, and that output looks a lot like this I count and then foo. But then we get this uncaught reference error. Foo is not defined at this line, at line 10. Perfect. So what's happening here is this var foo hoisting still occurs within the function. However, it gets hoisted to the very top of this function. So we can't really see that it goes anywhere else, but it does not become a global variable. Yeah, that's right. Rather, this is a local variable. However, we can see I count in here because this is a global variable, which means that it can be seen throughout. So here, that's the reason why we can see both I count and foo when myfunc is called. However, when console.log foo is called outside of myfunc, foo is undefined because it is only available within myfunc. It does not get hoisted to become a global variable. It stays within myfunc and can only be accessed within myfunc. This is advantageous because we want to encapsulate our variables within functions so that they're not available. Later on, if we wanted, which this could be bad practice, but we could have a var foo outside and then have it be something like I'm outside of the function. Now, if we do this, we see here now that our console log within the function gets called like normal. We set a new variable called foo outside of the function, and that is what gets console log here, not the one inside. It's not being overwritten, but it is being um, um, they do have the same name. This is not a good practice, but we can see that something like this is available to us now because of that local scoping. Now, we want to get on to how let and const can help us in order to have better block scoping within JavaScript. So let's get rid of this. So it's let and const. So these are basically the replacement for, let's just keep that. This is the replacement for var in ES6, which is the version of JavaScript that is being used most widespread on the internet. Let is the variable declarer for variables that can change, which this sounds really weird. And const is the variable declarer for variables that we want to stay constant. Now there's some things that we need to go over with that because it's not it's not a fast and hard rule about how these are used necessarily, but we'll kind of go over some of the different ways that we can use them. So if we say something like before, when we had var I count equals 0, what I would do is I would actually change this to let I count equals 0. I'm going to get rid of this so that we don't have any errors. Now, now I can do something like if true, let, let's just say let foo equals hello world again. We're going to console.log I count and foo, and then we're going to try doing that again outside of it. Okay, let's give that a whirl. See what happens. Okay, so now what's happening is we get into this, I count gets declared, I forgot a semicolon. Foo gets declared within the if statement. We console log that out, which is right here, but then we get this unreferenced error, foo is not defined at this point. Now before we saw is that when we had var foo, that it would work because the var got hoisted to become a global variable. However, with let, that makes it so that it stays within the block of code that we would expect it to. So that means that let is going to stay within our if. It means that foo is no longer accessible as a global variable outside of this if statement. That's the same for for loops and while loops and do while loops. So this can be really useful, especially for people coming from a programming background with C++, Java, whatever other language that's going to be more strict. This adds in that block scoping that is the standard. Now, if we talk about something called, if we talk about const, now if we say const I count equals 0. So now let's try and do this. We're going to do plus plus here. Now I'm going to show you what happens and then we'll kind of go over it. Const here. Let's see. Okay. So now what's happening is we're declaring I count as const. We're coming down here, we're declaring foo, and we're trying to console log this out. But it's like, wait a second. Assignment to constant variable. What does that mean? What that's trying to say is that when I declare a const, I expect that this value is not going to change. That I count is expected to be 0 its entire lifespan throughout the program. You can do that with anything really. You can say const bar equals hi universe. And then bar has to be hi universe throughout the entire time, throughout the entire program. We can't change it later. We can't say bar, actually let's do that here, bar plus equals and hello world. That's not going to work because bar has to say the same throughout the whole thing. Let's just prove that really quick. Let's get rid of this one first. Okay, this one's happening on line 10. That's on line 10. So something like that doesn't work. The only time that a const could change is if we have something like const a names for an array of names equals Peter, Greg, Davis. Okay, here we're going to have a const of an array of strings. What we can do here is we can do something like anames.pop. And then if we console.log anames, we're going to see what happens here. Let's get rid of this. We don't really need it. We don't need these either. Okay, so we're going to see that pop took off Davis off of the names. The reason being is because with const and arrays or objects, it does not allow reassignment. However, it does allow the variable or the object to be changed. This is a little bit different than when we're working with strings or numbers, where you're reassigning it over and over again. You're adding to it, you're concatenating. That it does not allow for those kind of things. However, it does allow for changes within the object, but it does not allow for it to be reassigned. So if I try to do anames equals Sarah, Janessa, Emma, then we're going to see that this is going to cause a problem. And let's just try and console log that out later. Okay, so Peter and Greg still happened, but then assignment to constant variable, it's not going to work. We can't change it. However, if I wanted to do something like anames.push Sarah, anames.push Janessa, let's just leave it at that. Comment that out. Nope, don't want to save it. It's going to yell at me because I'm trying to declare the variables multiple times. You can push those on. You can also do shift and unshift, but you cannot reassign objects or arrays that are declared as a const. Sorry this video is a little long, but I hope that it helps with figuring out what scoping is in JavaScript and also what Latin const is. Here are a few other examples where we have var x equals 0, we console.log in and out, it's going to be 1, var x equals 0, or let x equals 0, let x equals 1. This x inside is going to be a 1 because it's this x, but this x out here is going to be a 0 because it's this one up here, which can be a little confusing, but it's not practical to do something like that. Another thing with const, as we showed you before, have const equals 0. So down here, where const x equals 0, const x equals 1. So this one is referring to this guy. Out here, we're referring to this up here, this x. But then we try and do x plus equals 2, or x equals x plus 2. Because they type error assignment to constant variable. It never gets to console log. I hope you guys use Latin const. They are much more the standard practice now than var. If you use them on your homeworks and stuff, we'll be like, wow, this person is trying to understand JavaScript and they're doing a great job. So it stands out. Latin consts are things that get asked on interview questions all the time. If you're interviewing for any kind of web development, Latin const, ES6 scoping, that's a big question. They just want to make sure that you understand these things. So hopefully this video is helpful for you and you get a lot of it. Just let me know if you have any questions. You can Slack me or chat with me in my office hours.